Hey guys, thanks for joining me at Epic Fox today. I felt like playing a solitaire game today, and it's a fairly new game. I think it's about maybe 4 or 5 months old, and I have it set up down in front of us. It is in the Napoleonic Wars, and it was designed by R. Ben Madison, and it was published by White Dog Games. You can order it directly from their website. So, it has a predecessor, and that would be Don't Tread on Me by White Dog Games as well. And it uses a lot of the same mechanics that are found in that game. So if you have played that or are familiar with it, then you will fit right in here. So basically, this, as it is titled, The Napoleonic Wars, covers the Napoleonic Wars. And it's from the British perspective. So you are playing the role of the coalition, namely out of London. But you also have control over all of your allies, the Prussians, the Austrians, the Spanish at times, whether or not they're sided with you at any given time, as well as the Russians, if you can bring them into the fold, and the Swedes, etc. So there's a whole lot of minor details to this game that combined make it a pretty good experience. This is going to be, I think, my sixth playthrough of this game. It is pretty challenging, although you can pick up some details along or some strategies along the way that will make your life a lot easier as you play it through and continue to learn exactly, or not exactly, but kind of predict what the AI will be doing and when, and it'll help you survive a lot longer, possibly beat it. I have yet to beat this game, but with me, solitaire games are pretty hit or miss. A lot of times, I would rather pull out a full multiplayer game and play it solitaire if I'm, itching to play by myself, which a lot of times I am because I can't find an opponent always. But this was pleasantly surprising. It keeps me interested. I think it's a good design, and there's enough unique aspects to it and events that can happen randomly, but in pretty much a historical context, give or take a few years or whatnot. But like I said, for the most part, I enjoy it, and it keeps me entertained. And a lot of times when I'm itching to play some Napoleonic stuff, this is a good, quick game to play. It doesn't require a lot to set up, especially once you learn to set up. You can set it up without even breaking out the manual for the most part. So down in front of us is the main map. Over to the right, we have a counter tray. Let me see if I can kind of tilt it that way. So there is the counter tray right there. And that's just basically a holding box for your forces and extra counters until they come into play. And then over on the left, we have a turn marker chart, which keeps track of the individual nation's fervor, your treasury, your minor war funds, your admiralty funds, and the actual turn marker itself, as well as a Napoleon abdicates marker, which you want to get that up to 16. That's how you're going to win the game. Down on the bottom of that turn marker, you can see a whole bunch of counters I have stacked there. And those are the player force pool. So at any given time, that's where you're going to keep your forces in between the turns that you haven't gotten to the Grand Army or the Coalition phase yet, where you actually deploy your forces. So now we will go back and take a look at the center map itself again. Let me see if I can get that whole thing in there. I don't have the widest field of view on this camera, so sometimes it's a little tricky to get just right. I hope it's just right now. So, but anyway, you have 5 main spaces in this map, and that is going to be France, of course, and then you will have Germany, Austria, Italy, and Spain. Now, each of those has a small die in it. For instance, Austria is 3, Germany is 2, France is 1, and so on. None of them are marked with a 6. Now, down here in France, you can see what is called the buoy counter, and that has the symbol of 6 on it. Now, the buoy, or as some people might prefer to say, the butt marker, it is basically Napoleon's objective or main objective or goal, which is the French word "buoy" is goal, basically. And that can shift from turn to turn depending on what the turn marker says. And that pretty much creates whatever nation it's in. Let's say France, if you have a random event and you roll a 1, would normally be France. But since it's the Bui nation, it would also happen in France on the roll of a 6. So it kind of increases the odds of certain things taking place or Napoleon showing up in that particular spot or whatever you may have. So, like I said, that will change from turn to turn. The other important fact about that marker is when you end a turn, in order to determine whether or not you won the turn and whether you're going to move Napoleon's abdication marker up 1, is you need to control 3 of these main spaces at the end of any given turn, and one of them has to be the Bui nation. So, for instance, on the first turn, France is the Bui nation. So, to win the first turn, you would technically have to control France as well as 2 other spaces. It doesn't matter which one. I have tried in the beginning in the first turn to just go all out and try to invade France and capture it. It's rather difficult, to say the least, and pretty much every time I've done that, it has ended in absolute failure. So I will be avoiding that strategy this time since I am going to try and actually win this game. Um, Other than that, the other ways you can move the Napoleon abdicates marker is through minor wars, which will happen during each game turn. We'll draw a certain amount of chips or chits that will come out of the high diplomacy cup, which right now is empty. But on the first turn, there will be 2 of these no war markers placed in. So I'll go ahead and place them in, as well as the Treaty of Ildefonso. And that is basically, the focus isn't working there, but basically what that means is Spain will ally with France, and then all of the forces of Spain will transfer from my player force pool into the Grand Army Cup, which is right here, which is all of the French corps that are included in that cup. And those will be drawn out during the Grand Army phase, and they are deployed where there is French diplomats. Right now, you have Reinhardt in Germany, as well as Talleyrand in Germany as well, otherwise known as shit in a silk stocking. But those diplomats will bring in additional French forces wherever they are located at, and there can be up to a maximum of 2 in those spots. And otherwise, if I was to roll again for Germany, roll a 2, that means that diplomat would be returned to the hotel holding spot, which is right here, and then they would only go on to their next roll. Or if it was their second diplomat roll, then they would not roll again, and they kind of miss out on a diplomat for that turn. So hopefully that's what our goal is, or our hopes are for, is that anytime the French roll for diplomats, that they roll in a spot where there's already 2 diplomats, and that way it cancels out that roll. Preferably, we would like to be able to counter debate them and remove them from the map altogether. And we do that with our diplomats that are currently held in the London box up here. And those diplomats can be deployed, albeit at a cost of £1 per turn, to counter debate the French diplomats. They can also be used to remove war markers that we have lost, etc. We'll get into those here in a little bit. But I did want to go back to the Napoleon abdicates marker. So you can see in Switzerland, there's a little white symbol down in the lower right that has a N in it. This is a sign for Napoleon. That means that is a strategic location. So if a minor war does break out in Switzerland, if we win that war, then the Napoleon abdicates marker will move up 1. If we lose it, it will move down 1. So it is a strategic thing, and preferably we would like to win those. If we lose them, then we will leave the chit on that space flipped upside down, and that will affect further diplomacy attempts to bring other countries that have surrendered or are neutral, who are now eligible, to be tempted or persuaded to join us. It will have negative effects on our diplomacy skills when we attempt to do that. So if we do lose a war, it's kind of important that you get those minor war objectives or losses off the map as quickly as possible. Other than that, there's not many ways to raise his marker. So you only have 16 turns in this full campaign, from the beginning to the end. And you want to, win turns and win all those minor wars. And hopefully that will win you the game. The other way you can move it is if you have high battles on the high seas between the fleets. If you win those wars, then you can also move that Napoleon abdicates marker up. Currently, the British control the high seas. That is why the British fleet, as well as Nelson, is in that box, and that will remain so until we lose or the Barbary pirates come. This game itself goes from 1792 all the way until 1821, as 1816 to 1821. So, or excuse me, 1818 to 1821. So each turn is about 3 years. Turn 15 is the 1815 to 1817 years, which is, 1815. Many of you know this if you're watching this video, is when the Waterloo campaign took place. So I really haven't gotten that far into the game yet, so it'll be quite a surprise for me if we do make it that far. I think I got the skill set required to do so at this point, so my hopes are high. I would be interested to find any events that, lead to Napoleon's banishment and his return, etc. I mean, you have all the different phases of Napoleon here. There's 3 different Napoleon markers. I have 2 of them on the map. Or one of them on the map, along with his wife Josephine. I'm gonna take those off right now. I was just recently played another playthrough on this game. I thought I fully reset it, but obviously not. So I will go ahead and return those to the counter tray. But you have 3 different Napoleon markers there that will transpire and go transgress through the ages. And you have a whole lot of other counters in there that will be added to the High Diplomacy Cup during certain events or other minor wars that break out. For instance, when the war in Switzerland breaks out, you will add the minor war in Ireland to the High Diplomacy Cup. So there's all sorts of events that lead to the potential occurrence of other events. It's a very intricate game system for such a small footprint and such a quick play. It really is a kick to play. I get a high level of enjoyment out of this game. I can't stress that enough. So that pretty much, I didn't cover everything. So income, we have these gold markers here, the pound markers. For instance, Mysore is worth £1, Egypt is worth £1, London is worth 4, Ireland is worth 1, and Haiti is worth 1, and the Cape of Good Hope is worth 1. And then you also have Austria, as long as they're in the coalition, is worth 2, and Germany is also worth 2 as long as they're in the coalition. That's a total of £13 income per turn, and that you can also lose if you lose these minor wars. Now, most of the time, I believe in all cases where there is a pound marker, I'll go up here because I don't know if you can see that one down below in Egypt, but in Mysore, there is underneath that gold marker, there's a gold symbol right there, similar to the Napoleonic strategic location symbol. Now, what this means is that this is a war of commerce if a war breaks out there. So if you lose that war, it won't necessarily hurt your Napoleon abdication marker, but you will lose this income from that location. So those are pretty vital too. You can lose 1, maybe 2, and still be all right, depending on circumstances, but you don't want to push your luck with losing those commercial areas like that. You can also see, if I move that marker back out of the way, that in some locations there's an anchor, such as Mysore, Egypt, Malta, and USA over there, a couple other ones. Now, what that is if a minor war breaks out in a location where there is an anchor, that if you control the high seas, you can help yourself and get an advantage, a modifier. I believe you get to roll 1 extra die as opposed to 2 die to win that battle. Now, you'll see in each location, for instance, Serbia, in this hexagon, I believe it is, there is a 12 number. And in the Balkans, there's an 11. In Egypt, there's an 11. Switzerland, there's a 12. That's the number you need to roll on 2d6 to win that minor war. So if you have an anchor and you control the high seas, you're going to get to roll 3d6 as opposed to the 2d6, and that will help out quite a bit. You can also affect those die roll by taking funds from your minor war fund, and for every £1 you use in that war from your minor war fund, you can add +1 on the die roll modifier as well. So the income phase, with the get money phase, in the very beginning of each turn, you are going to keep track of your total income that you gain, and then you are going to distribute portions of that to your admiralty or your admiralty bonus fund and your admiral or your minor war fund as well. So if you have 10 talents or 10 pounds in the beginning of the turn, and you want to put 3 of them in the minor war fund and 3 of them in the admiralty fund, that is going to leave you with 4 pounds left in your treasury and 3 pounds left in the other funds, respectively. So that is kind of how you got to balance your funds there and decide what is the best way to use them. After the get money phase, you are going to designate the Bui nation, like I said, which is going to change. Turn 1, it is going to be in France. And then you're going to perform any printed events on the turn marker. So every turn there is going to be an event that you play, and each of them will usually add chits into the cup or cause certain other things to happen, whether it's fervor levels rising or dropping or whatever it may be. The first event is going to be Valmy, which many of you know was an opener here. So that is going to open up the war, the minor war of the Cape of Good Hope. So at the beginning of turn 1, that will be placed into the High Politics Cup, as well as the minor war in Switzerland, and that will be placed in the High Politics Cup. So we'll get that out of the way and go ahead and do that. That's not going to break the game if we do that. And then after that, you're going to draw the allotted chits out of the High Diplomacy Cup. In turn 1 and many of the beginning turns, it's going to be 2 chits per turn. So we're going to draw 2 out of that cup per turn and see if any minor war breaks out or anything else. And I need to take a quick break real fast, get a drink of water, and then I'll be back to explain the rest. Okay, so we left off with drawing the chits. Once those are drawn and we've resolved all the events, whether it's minor wars or whatever it may be, we are then going to, if we want to, we can purchase 1 additional high politics chit, and that costs a total of 3 pounds. And really, the only time you'd want to do that is if you knew there was a chit in there that was beneficial to you and the odds of drawing it were pretty great. So after that phase, that's going to take care of the high politics phase. You move on to the diplomacy phase, and that's where the French are going to place their diplomats. And then afterwards is a counter diplomacy phase where you, as a player, you can put your diplomats to the best use, whether it's debating, counter debating, removing the lost minor wars, or you can attempt to use them to align neutral or surrendered countries back into the coalition. After that, you're going to go through the Grand Army phase, which is where the French are going to place their corps across the different spaces. 4 corps are always going to get placed in France. After that, 4 will be placed in the Bui nation of the current turn. And after, you will place any required diplomatic forces. So 1 corps where every French diplomat is currently. And then afterwards, you're going to roll on the French invasion table, which is this table. You can kind of see you're going to start, you roll a single d6 and you add whatever turn number it is. So on turn 1, you're going to roll 1d6 and add 1. So you're going to get basically either 2 through 7 as a result. And it kind of determines, well, if you roll 7, 3 corps are going to go to Austria, 2 to Italy, and 1 to Germany. And that's how that works. When Napoleon does come into the game, you will use this chart off to the right of the invasion table, and that basically tells you where Napoleon goes and how many corps he takes with him. There is a grand strategy column scattered kind of randomly throughout there, I believe on the 6s. And there is 6, 11, and 16 result. And that grand strategy can really ruin your whole game plan because the coalition forces after the Grand Army phase, Napoleon does not come in on the Grand Army phase. So you take care of all the deployment of the French Corps, and then you do your coalition deployment phase, which you can start off purchasing duchy units and then placing your coalition forces. The coalition forces are free. The duchy forces, not Dutch forces, the duchy forces cost 1 pound per stack, and I'll explain those during gameplay. But so after you have deployed all of your forces, then Napoleon deploys, and on that grand strategy roll, he may move that Bui nation to a different location and change the objective for the entire turn. Which, if the Bui nation is Austria, let's say, and you've deployed a lot of your forces to fight a large section of French forces, and then Napoleon shows up and moves the Bui nation to Spain, and you didn't deploy any forces out over there, well, you're pretty much going to lose the turn just off that Bui roll, so, or that grand strategy roll. So there's, Napoleon's tricky in this, and it can add a lot of intensity to the game when you know that can happen, and you're kind of hoping for things to go a certain way. Um, and I enjoy it a lot, like I've said a couple times already before. So we've covered the Grand Army phase and the Coalition phase. At the end of that, we go ahead and go into the battle phase, and this is going to be where you resolve battles. Any place where there is coalition forces and French forces, there is going to be a battle, and you're going to resolve all the battles until there is no opposing forces in the same spaces left anywhere else on the map. Now, it is kind of abstract, but that's okay. I dig it for this style of game. Takes a little bit of getting used to. The results are, kind of either everybody's eliminated from one side and not the other, and very rarely there's anything in between. I do think that the times I've had cavalry refights, that does add a very interesting aspect to the game. I wish there was more of that involved in a lot of the battles and not just when you roll a cavalry refight. So I am going to show you a couple different counters here. Let me pull them out. So you have at the end of turns, you will, if there is French casualties in the box, you will roll to see if they're permanently eliminated, and a roll of a 1 or 2 will eliminate a unit. These corps with the red dot, they will always be the first to be eliminated. If there is no corps with a red dot, you will go to move to corps without dots, and the weakest corps without a dot will be eliminated, and they are removed permanently from the game when they're eliminated. So the French corps and the French army gets weaker and weaker over the years, and that kind of reflects what happened in real life. So, and then you have French corps with the white dot, which means pretty much they're immortal. They cannot be eliminated. This is Murat, and he is, as many of you may know, Napoleon's brother-in-law, King of Naples, and he is immortal, which there's a little bit of confusion on my part, or maybe questioning. I don't know about confusion, but for instance, I can't find him. I don't think he's out here. But they have Ney, obviously, he was a French cavalry commander. He is not immortal, whereas Murat is. So I found that kind of strange because, as far as I know of, they both lived through. Well, maybe not. No, I'm thinking about Waterloo. So yeah, I guess I just answered my own question there. But anyway, that is what those symbols on the French corps signify here. And I think we've pretty much talked about most of the turn. So after the battle phase, we go to the gentleman phase. So there's like Mozart, famous characters of the times back then who can be persuaded to come to London and take refuge in London. And you'll gain extra income from them as well when that happens. And after that, is the abdication phase, where you're going to determine nation control, who controls what spaces, and you will move the Napoleon abdicates marker if necessary. You're going to check for victory or defeat, and you're going to perform nation fervor modifications, recall diplomats for consultations. So all the British diplomats are going to go back to London. The French diplomats are going to stay, and Napoleon and Josephine will go back to Napoleon's bed, and you'll restore all flipped or delayed corps, which happen in some events. And then you will check for French casualties. I will probably move that step, check for French casualties, up to the beginning of the abdication phase. And that way I can roll on camera and get the evidence that I need to prove that I'm winning on camera here. And then I'll go ahead and do the rest of the abdication phase off camera. And I don't think that's that. As a matter of fact, I know that's not going to break the game at all. So after the French casualty phase will be the clear the deck phase, which is when you remove all French corps, all British corps from the map, and then you can choose whether or not you're going to leave the duchy forces on the map to stay there. And after that, you will have the opportunity again to transfer funds from one fund to the other, but you can't transfer funds from the Admiralty budget as they were stingy. Once they got it, they were not letting go. After, there is going to be an accidents phase, and you are going to roll on this chart, which is the accident table. And there's going to be some more historic events and generic events that happen in there, whether it's naval battles, conscription, divorce, the guillotine, which is going to change the religious status of France, which is marked right here, which I also did not reset from my last play. That starts off in as an atheist nation, and that slowly works its way up through deist, secular, and Catholic. There is ghetto laws currently in effect in the beginning of the game, and the Pope is located down in Italy. There's some special adjustments that he makes to light infantry rolls, which is one of the phases in the battle phase that I'll describe more to about later. There is a royalist unit currently in France causing trouble, and there are two emigre units or regiments or whatever you want to call these corps up in Germany at the time. They kind of fell back from France to continue the fight against Napoleon the Ogre. Um, I think I pretty much covered the intro to the best of my ability and as quick as possible as I could. So I think it took up about 25 minutes here. I'll probably do this as a separate video, and then I'll begin the gameplay. Maybe I'll do the first turn on the same video, just knock it out of the way here. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining me here for In the Napoleonic Wars, a solitaire game by Ben R. Madison, published by White Dog Games. Stick around and check out the game. Okay, so I think I got the camera back to a pretty good field of view here. And we are going to go ahead and start off turn number 1. So I went ahead and did the get money phase and put it into my treasury. So I acquired 13 pounds. Keep on wanting to call them talents. I've been playing a lot of Pax Romana and other ancient games lately. But so if I call them talents every once in a while, forgive me. But after the get money phase, we went ahead and did step 2, which is move pounds from treasury to minor war fund or to the Admiralty budget. And I went ahead and I moved a total of 2 pounds to the Admiralty budget and 6 pounds to the minor war fund, which left me with a total of 5 pounds in my treasury. Afterwards, we had to designate the Bui nation, which I previously stated on the first turn is France. So the marker is already down there in France. Afterwards, we are going to perform any printed events on the turn track. And as I also previously stated, turn 1 is going to be Valmy. And the description of that is in a tiny battle near the German border, European aristocrats are shocked to discover that revolutionary France will actually fight for its existence. And the outcome of that is we add Switzerland, the minor war Switzerland, the minor war Cape of Good Hope chits, and also one random client state. So I have gone ahead and added the Cape of Good Hope and Switzerland chits. And now we will go ahead and draw a random client state. And that is going to be a -1, which is in favor of the French. Basically, whenever we put one of these chits in one of the spaces, that is Napoleon attempting to create a client state or a puppet state in that particular location. So we will go ahead and put that in there. And those affect the light infantry rolls, which once again I'll explain here in this turn up in the battle phase. So there is a couple positive modifiers which are beneficial for the coalition, and they're not so successful client states or client states that maybe perhaps didn't react so well that the French had hoped, but there are few and far in between, and I don't know, hopefully we'll draw a couple here pretty soon. But anyway, we have gone ahead and played the printed event, and now we are going to go ahead and draw the high politics chit. And in the first turn, it's going to be 2 chits. So there's the cup right here. And the first one is a war in the Cape of Good Hope, which is down in the lower left there. And that is going to be a commercial war, war of commerce. And so we will place that marker there in there. Let me just kind of rotate the camera there to ensure that we got it on screen. And it is a anchor as well, so we will have support from our Navy. So we will be rolling 3d6 as well here. And we are going to determine how many pounds from our minor war fund we want to use. We also got to keep in mind that there is another minor war chit in that cup that could be drawn, and that is the minor war of Switzerland, which is a strategic location. So, you know, we kind of got to balance those possibilities there when we are deciding exactly what we want to do. And I do need to double check here just to make sure I'm not missing something from the minor war phase with the naval intervention there. So if the Royal Navy rules the waves, add +2 to the minor war die roll. And if Nelson, let's see. Oh, Nelson is only going to affect, I apologize, Nelson is only going to affect an actual naval battle in the high seas. So the Royal Navy controlling the high seas is only going to add +2 to the minor war die roll. So it's a good thing I did double check that. I have so many different little rules from so many different games that sometimes it's hard to keep track of. So we need to beat an 11 or more on 2d6. We have a +2 modifier already. I am going to go ahead and spend, let's go ahead and put half the minor war fund. We have a total of 6 in there, so I'm going to spend 3, move the minor war fund down to 3, and that way we have a little bit in reserve just in case the minor war of Switzerland pops up next. So we have a total of a +5 modifier. We need to beat an 11 to win that minor war. And we get a 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we rolled a 6 and we put 3 pounds in from the treasury, which will equal, if I can think of this, 9. And then it's +2 modifier for the Royal Navy, which equals 11. So we do win that war, and we will permanently remove the minor war of the Cape of Good Hope from there. And we will also retain our 1 pound income from Cape of Good Hope. So that is a plus to us, and we still need to draw one more chit. And there's the client state right there. So now we have to roll for the random nation, as we've already discussed. So France will be a 1 or a 6, and then 3, 2, 4, and 5 respectively. We'll go ahead and roll. And we rolled a 4, so that will be placed in Italy. And we can see the Pope is down there with a +2. And now they have made a client state out of Italy, which is a -1. So those will both affect the light infantry rolls in future battles that take place in Italy. So the total modifier is going to be a +1 modifier to the light infantry roll, which will be an advantage for the coalition. So now we have completed the high diplomacy phase. We could purchase a third counter for 3 pounds, but we're definitely not going to do that this turn. And we will go ahead and move into the diplomacy phase. So now France is going to deploy their diplomats. So we'll go ahead and roll for the first one. And we rolled a 5, which will be Spain. So 1 diplomat will go to Spain. The second diplomat will go to 2, which is Germany. As I said before, Germany already has 2 diplomats, so that diplomat will return to the hotel, and they do not re-roll that die. Now the diplomacy phase is done, so we can go ahead and move into the counter diplomacy phase. And this is where we are going to deploy our diplomats in order to remove theirs or remove any lost minor wars, or to attempt to bring other neutral nations in. And one thing I didn't explain is the way the Russians and Swedes work. They cannot be brought in unless through certain events. So in the case of the Russians, one way is They have to go through all of their Russian wars and win or lose. And once these boxes fill up and those Russian wars have been taken care of, then Napoleon will go ahead and invade Russia. And then we'll move on from there. Switzerland is through, or excuse me, Sweden is through a certain event that will take place. We'll get to those when they come, but I just wanted to state that you cannot, right from the start, attempt to deploy your diplomats to bring those nations into the fold. You do have to wait till certain events have already occurred. So, that being said, we are going to attempt to, and keep in mind also that for each of these we deploy to counter debate, it's going to cost us £1. We have £5 in the treasury, and we also need to save some in case we need duchy forces to fight off any of the French corps out of any of our objectives that we may be trying to retain. So we are going to go ahead and let's have Cavalry debate Reinhardt, and we will, let's see, have our other 4-level diplomat debate down in Spain and see if we can remove them. So that's going to cost me 2 talents. So for 3, we now have 3 pounds in our treasury, and we can go ahead and attempt to debate Reinhardt right now. So we have a skill level of 4, and that means we need to roll a 4 or less. Since their diplomat is rated a 1, they are going to add 1 to my dice roll modifier. So technically I'm going to have to roll a 3 or less. So we'll go ahead and roll. And we rolled a 6, which is not going to do it. So that was a failed debate. And now we can go ahead and roll down here in Spain. They do not have any skill level on their diplomat, -4. So that is going to be a 4 or less on the die roll to remove that diplomat. And we got a 2, so that is going to remove the diplomat in Spain. He is returned to the hotel holding box. Okay, that takes care of the counter diplomacy phase since I only deployed 2 of my diplomats. And now we go ahead and go to the Grand Army phase. And we're going to take all these French corps that are in there. And the first thing we're going to do is draw 4 French corps and place them in France. So there is 2. We have a 6 and another 6. And what do we have here? We have a 4 and another 6. So we got 3 of the 6 corps out of the way in France, which is a good thing for us because I do not intend on invading France on this turn, as I stated before. The next thing we do is we draw 4 French corps for the Bouy Nation, which is going to be in France as well. And I just grabbed a handful, which happened to equal 4 exactly. So we drew, who is that? Kellerman, which is a 5 rated cavalry commander. And usually when I do the Bouy stack, I place them above the nation's flag. That way they are easy to remember who's who. We drew a 3 corps, another 6 corps, and Grouchy, which is a level 4 cavalry commander. So we will place those in the Bouy stack, which, like I said, I place in the upper left over the nation's flag. That way, it won't happen this turn because Napoleon's not going to be in this turn, but in further turns moving onward, they have when Napoleon deploys, if he rolls a grand strategy, there's a possibility that he may move the Bouy forces. So it is important that you recognize and keep track of which corps were actually the Bouy forces. After we do the Bouy forces, we will draw counters for the French diplomats. There's only 2 on the map, so we will place 2 in Germany. And we drew a 4 and another 4. And now we are going to do the French invasion roll, which I showed you previously as this chart. So we're going to roll 1d6 and add 1 onto the die roll. And we rolled a 2, so that's going to total 3. So they are going to place 3 corps in Spain, 2 in Germany, and 1 in Italy. So 3-4 in Spain. There's 2 of them. We have a 4 and a 5. We need 1 more. We have a 5. Who is that? Miwa. And then we need 2 in Germany. So we drew a 4 and a 6. And we need 1 in Italy, which is a 4. So now that their deployment phase is done, the Grand Army phase, we are going to go to the coalition phase. So we are going to get to, first we need to purchase duchy forces if we choose. And these are the white background with the royalist shields on there, the coat of arms. And there are 3 strength ratings. There's 3, 2, and 1. And you purchase these in stacks of 3. It doesn't matter what their strength rating is, or you could purchase less than 3 if you wanted, but it's still going to cost the same. It's going to cost £1 per stack, and a stack can be up to 3 counters. Doesn't matter what their strength rating is. Now, once you deploy them, at the end of the turn, if they're still alive, you can choose to either leave them in the country that they are in currently, or you can remove them back to the player force pool. If you remove them, if the next time you need them, you're going to have to pay that £1 over again to deploy them. After you deploy coalition forces, excuse me on that phone call, after the duchy forces, you will deploy your actual coalition forces, the Austrians, the Prussians, the Britons, and the Spanish in the beginning of the game. And then if you bring them into the fold later, the Russians and the Swedes. And these forces are placed for free, so you don't have to worry about paying for those. They will always be available as long as those nations are actually part of the coalition. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy them really quickly, and then I will be right back as soon as I do. All right, guys, so I have, well, first of all, I turned the ringer down on my phone, so there shouldn't be any more jump scares. Sorry about that. I try and remember to do that. I always seem to forget. And people always seem to be calling me whenever I'm trying to record. So I have gone ahead and deployed my forces. Now, I have deployed the majority of my forces up here in Germany, and I am intending to win that battle. As I told you, I was not intending on invading France. For me, it always ends in disaster when I attempt to do that. So I deployed the majority of my forces. I only purchased 1 duchy stack, and it is a unit, 3 units of 3 strength forces. And the reason I used all 3 strength counters is because I'm intending on keeping that stack there, and I'll explain why a little bit later. Well, one of the reasons is the next turn the Bui nation is going to be in Germany, so I'm expecting a big battle there anyway. So I do want a extra strength force there, and I don't want to have to pay for them next turn. I put 1 unit in Austria because I am intending on controlling this unit, this province at the end of the turn, just in case something happens and I end up, controlling France. I still have, a couple nations here. I deployed the Austrian forces and 1 British unit to Italy because I think we can easily handle that 1 French corps down there. And in Spain, I put my 2 Spanish units there against the little bit larger French force. The only place that the Spanish corps can deploy to is either France or Spain. So I didn't have much choice. Well, you might ask, well, why would I even deploy them into Spain, since obviously the chances are high that they're going to lose? Well, that's because I'm going to resolve this battle first, and I'm going to do so because I'm going to attempt to draw the French cavalry down into Spain. And if they do go for that and they deploy down in Spain, it's going to be that much harder for them to get over into these provinces to join into those battles because they will not be adjacent to these battles. So they will be 1 space further away. It creates an extra modifier there and makes it a little more difficult for the cavalry to react. So that is the game plan there. All that being said, now I'll go ahead and walk you through all these battles. So like I said, we're going to resolve Spain first. The first thing you want to check is the Spanish fervor level, which is currently at 12. and you are going to make a roll and compare it to over on the turn track. There is a light infantry table that you compare it to the current fervor level, and it's 12. So on a 1, 2, or 3, it's going to be French dominance, and on a 4, 5, 6, it's going to be French advantage. And here is the different levels right here. You have French dominance, French advantage, and no advantage. So this represents how many die you will roll during the battle, either 1, 2, or 3. And you want them to roll more die because the higher the roll, the better the outcome is for the coalition. So if they have a French dominance, they're only going to be rolling 1 die, and then you will modify that by strength points. Who has higher strength points, whether it's coalition or French. So they have, like we said, 12 fervor. So we will roll a 1, 2, or 3 is going to be French dominance. And we rolled a 4, so that is only going to be French advantage. And now we total up their battle points. They are going to have 14, and we are going to have 8. So the difference there is 6. So we are going to roll, because it's French advantage, we are going to roll 2 die, and we are going to subtract the difference, which is 6. If it was coalition difference of positive 6, we would add 6 to the dice roll. But it's a negative, so we're going to subtract 6. And we got a 5. So that's going to be a total of -1. That is going to be a full Spanish retreat, coalition retreat, and units that are in Spain can retreat into Portugal, and French forces will not follow into Portugal. Since they rolled a 1, normally they would be able to pursue, but since they retreated into Portugal, like I said, the French are unable to. If that would have been a battle here and my forces would have fallen back into Austria, their French forces could follow into Austria and we'd perform another battle step inside Austria. So all that's done there. Now we can go ahead. Oh, and you know what? I never rolled to see if those guys deployed down there, which was the whole intentions of that. I just completely blew it. Well, you know what? I forgot. We'll just pretend that the French saw through my plan there, unfortunately. So we will then go ahead and which battle do we want to resolve next? Let's do the battle in Germany, because I think that even if those cavalry do come, I think I still easily have the force points to potentially win that battle. I should at least. So the first step should be cavalry reaction. So, and you roll once for each cavalry unit. So we have a 4 and a 5. We will roll for the 4 first, and there's no coalition cavalry here, so there's no modifier, but there is coalition cavalry in the destination space. So that's going to be a +1 modifier. The French cavalry are going to always redeploy on anything but a 6. So that's a -1 modifier. So it's going to be they will redeploy on a 1, 2, 3, 4. We will roll for the 4 strength first, and we're hoping for a 5 or 6. And we rolled a 4, so they are going to join the battle. And now the 5 level corps, we're hoping for a 5 or 6. And we rolled another 4. So they're going to join the battle as well. There's 9 battle points there. 13, 17, 27. They have a total of 27 battle points. And now I have to total mine up. And remember, our emigre are there in assistance as well. There's 5. There's 14. Let's count this Prussian stack. 20, 24, 27, 30, 37, 43. So we have 43 versus the French 27. That's a difference of 16. So we will add 16 onto the dice roll. The German fervor at this time is pretty high. It's at 14. So we are going to roll on the 14 chart. So 1 through 4 is French dominance, and a 5 or 6 is going to be French advantage. We want a 5 or 6. And we got a 1, so that's going to be French advantage or French dominance. So they're only going to roll the 1 die. Whoops, excuse me. They're only going to roll the 1 die. and they are going to add 16 to this dice roll. So we got a 6 plus the 16 is going to be 22. Let's find the battle results chart. Oh yeah, it's over on the turn record. So 22 is going to be a coalition pursuit, but we rolled a 6, so we are not going to get a chance to pursue. We are not going to cause any casualties. Their whole army is going to retreat back to France. And if this would be any turn but the first, it would not be going good for us, because at the end of the turn, if we do not control, the 3 space requirement, and one of those has to be the Bui Nation, if we do not control those objectives, then Napoleon is going to win the turn. However, his abdication marker will move down since it's level, his abdication marker is at 0. That's really not a threat this turn. The only thing that's going to stop that abdication marker from going back down is if we cause French casualties. If there's any French casualties in the casualty box, then his abdication marker will not lower from there. So that would have been a potential disaster for us because we didn't kill anything there. And we obviously know we're not going to control the Bui Nation at the end of the turn. So Napoleon's going to win this turn. So if we had his abdication marker up, let's say if we would have won the war in Switzerland and raised his abdication up to 1, there's a high potential possibility that we would have lost that increase just from this fact. But we still have a potential to cause a casualty down here. So we will go ahead and do that. And notice that now this cavalry has once again retreated back to France because I didn't kill them. So they're now eligible to attempt to join into Italy, which would be a bad thing. We do not have any cavalry in Italy, so there is no modifier. They are going to join in on anything but a 6. We'll roll for the top one right now, the level 5, and we rolled a 3, so he is going to go down there. And now we will roll for the level 4, anything but a 6, and we rolled a 4. So they are going to go down and join in the fight. They have a total of 13 points. Oh, and here's what I didn't do. I forgot to mention. So Spain, the French won the battle in Spain. So the French fervor is going to go up from 12 to 13 in favor of the French. The coalition won the battle in Germany. So the fervor level in Germany is going to drop from 14 to 13. And now we can total up our points. 11. We have 19 points versus their 16. That's going to be a +3 modifier. And don't forget on the light infantry roll, these modifiers, it's going to be a +1 on the light infantry roll. The Italian fervor is at 14, which is normally a 1 through 4 would be French dominance, but since that modifier is there, it's going to be a 1 through 3 basically. We're going to add 1 to the die roll. We're looking for a 4, 5, or 6 preferably, and we roll a 1. Of course, I shouldn't have used those white die. So that's going to be French dominance. We are going to roll 1 die, and we're going to add 3 to it to determine what happens. And we roll 4, which is going to be a 7. A 7 is going to be a French exchange. All units on both sides are eliminated, and only the strongest French unit survives, which is going to be that cavalry commander. And all of these are placed in the casualty box. So you can see I kind of failed with that first mistake there where I tried to draw the cavalry down there. That would have made it much more difficult for that cavalry to get over in those locations. Not much more, but a tad bit. Maybe it would have benefited me, maybe not, who knows. But that's the way things turned out. The Italian fervor is going to raise from 14 to 15 because they won a battle there in that location. They are going to control France, Spain, and Italy, whereas the coalition at the end of the turn is going to control Austria and Germany. So I'm obviously not going to win the turn. However, the good thing is I caused French casualties, And so at the end of the turn, I'm going to go ahead and get to roll for French permanent elimination, which is going to come a little bit further down the list in the end of turn phase. We've done the battle phase. We're going to do the gentleman phase now. It's too early in the game. There are no cultural icons in play as of this time. Now we are going to do the abdication phase. We're going to determine nation control. We already did. We're not going to move the abdication marker up at all. And we're going to check for victory. We're not winning, of course. And we're going to perform nation fervor modifications. So whoever's in control, basically, the fervor is going to get adjusted by 1 in their favor. So in France, fervor is already at 16. It's not going any higher. Spain, the French are in control, so it's going to go up from 13 to 14. Italy, they're in control, so it's going to go from 15 to 16. Austria, we are in control. It's going to go from 12 to 11. And in Germany, we are in control. It's going to go from 13 to 12. That takes care of the fervor modifications. And now we can recall all diplomats, etc. So the coalition removes our diplomats. The French diplomats stay in play. Now we restore all flipped or delayed corps, which there are none. And now we roll for French casualties. So we're looking for a 1 or a 2. On a 1 or a 2, they're going to lose one of their corps permanently because they do have non-dotted units in there. And we roll the 1, so we do get to eliminate a French corps. The French corps we look at, let me go to it's on the very last page of the rules. We look for the weakest dot infantry first, there is none. The weakest dot cavalry second, there is none. Third, we go to the weakest non-dot infantry, which is this level 4 corps right here. So that level 4 corps is permanently removed, and that takes care of the French casualty step. And now we clear the deck. So we're going to return all the French corps and all the coalition corps, etc. And then you get an additional chance to transfer minor war funds around. Just you cannot transfer out of the Admiralty budget, like I already explained. And this allows you, let's say, if you know you're going to get 13 pounds income and you're at 10 total in your treasury, you're not going to be able to go above 16. So, that's going to be a big loss. Like, let's see, you would lose like 6 pounds. You'd be losing 6 pounds. So you could transfer some from your treasury into your minor war fund, into your Admiralty budget. And that way, when it comes to the get money phase, you can increase your, get the maximum efficiency out of your gains here. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh yeah, also at the very end, we're going to perform the accidents phase, which we will roll on here for, and I'll go ahead and roll anyway now. And at this point, we only roll 1 die for accidents, so we'll go ahead and roll. We roll a 5 on the accidents. That is going to be the Institute of France, Unexpected Accident, Viva Bolivar, and Naval Battle. So we can go ahead and roll a naval battle here right now, and I'll perform the rest of them, and I'll explain those on the next clip here. But the naval battle is rated at a die roll of 10 or greater. Nelson is there, so we're going to roll 3d6, and we're going to use up both pounds in the Admiralty budget. So we're going to roll 3d6 and add +2. We need to beat a 10 or more. And we easily beat that. So naval battle, we win a naval battle, nothing bad is going to happen, but the Napoleon abdication marker gets moved up by 1, so that is a great thing. I'm going to go ahead and perform the rest of the accidents, and then I'll explain the rest of those here in just a minute. All right, so I went ahead and cleaned up the map here, so all the corps have been removed, and then I went ahead and did the rest of the accidents, that occurred. So there was Institute of France, which you roll a random nation, and I rolled a 5, which was Spain, and you increase the national fervor by +5. So the fervor went up +5. It's now maxed out at 16. There's now 3 nations that are fully in favor of the French. That is Italy, France, and Spain. So 3 of the 5 nations are in complete favor of the French at this point. You would also adjust if there was any cultural icons in any locations, which there is not, so we didn't have to worry about that part. Then we had an unexpected accident, which you draw one additional chit out of the High Diplomacy Cup. We did draw, and we drew a new No War chit, thankfully. So there is not going to be basically any effect out of that. However, that counter is permanently removed from this game. And then we rolled Viva Bolivar, which, what did that do? Oh, yes, that delayed one Spanish corps, and that happens no matter which side the Spanish are fighting on. They are fighting on our side. So I flipped one of them over, and my player force pool will only have one Spanish corps this turn, and that is a level 5 Spanish corps. The other one has been delayed. Other than that, we had the naval battle and we saw the results of that on camera, so that was a good thing for us. And now we are ready to go ahead and go into turn 2. But I think I'm going to go ahead and put this one up as one video. I think it's probably pushing over an hour time frame here, so I'm going to load it up. Thanks again for watching here, guys.